Now, let's go to One Nation founder and leader, Pauline Hanson, joins us from Scenic Rim in Queensland. Good to talk to you, Pauline. Tell us about The Voice and the calls for more detail. Peter Dutton's been very strong on that. He says we've got the referendum date, we still don't have the detail. What's the main detail that you'd like to see from the government?
What they propose in legislation after we have endorsed it, if we do, in the Constitution. Chris, you've had Pat Anderson, Noel Pearson, Megan Davis, Thomas Mayo. They've said it is not an advisory body. We want control of it. They say the government can legislate for it now if they want it to, but we want it enshrined in the Constitution so it can never be taken out. This is what they're saying. It's more than just an advisory body, because it's going to be a body that is going to dictate the terms. If we put it in the Constitution, what we are doing is enshrining these people to be the voice for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That voice that was never around when Captain Cook and Governor Phillip was here, because there was no sovereignty or any body of people. So once we enshrine in the Constitution, we're endorsing them to be the body of people to do the treaty with. That's why they need the voice first, then comes the treaty.
Now, of course, it will be advisory. We've got the wording of the change to the Constitution. That makes it clear that it will only be advisory, and we don't know who'll be on it. Are you saying you want draft legislation of exactly how the voice would be legislated after a referendum?
You know, Chris, I've listened to you about the COVID, and I've heard you, about climate change. You're very articulate and you do your research. What I can't understand is that when this evidence has come out, those people who have been involved in drafting this Constitution or drafting this to do with the voice and the Uluru Statement from the Heart, you are not open-minded to really have a good investigative look at it and what this could mean to the country. Yes, Australians, they feel that, the Aboriginal were the first people here. Why would you give people based on their race the right to have an extra voice in Parliament when you've got 11 people already representing them on the floor of Parliament besides me? I'm also representing them. Why don't you question where has the $33 billion a year gone over the past how many years? Over $1 trillion, and that's what Warren Mundine said today, over $1 trillion.
We all know that. We all know this country's failed in Indigenous affairs for years. We know there's been a lot of money wasted and the gap hasn't been closed and all the rest of it. I'm just saying, you say it won't be advisory. Well, it's very clear from the constitutional wording that it will only be advisory. It'll make representations. What more detail do you want other than the constitutional wording? Do you want to see a draft legislation of how it would actually be formulated?
It won't be just that, Chris. We know. You go to section 51 of the Constitution and it just outlines marriages, lighthouse, coinage and all the rest of it. The government then puts in place what legislation they want to. The Constitution is just the basis of it. This can actually then go anywhere. It can go anywhere. They can actually put aside seats in Parliament purely for Aboriginals. It can be a rent tax. It can be anything added to it.
Well, you can't put.
This is what we don't know.
But we've got to keep this debate on the facts, and we know from the facts of the constitutional wording being put up that it's only going to be advisory. It can only make representations. Now, yes, all sorts of people could ask for all sorts of things. We know that. Now, and if a bunch of radicals got control of the voice and demanded reparations, still it's only advisory. Nothing could actually happen without the Parliament doing it. So we can't spread misinformation suggesting the voice would be anything other than advisory. You might say it's nutty. You might say it might ask for too much. You might say governments will cave into it. But in the end, it can't do anything. Only parliaments and governments can actually make those changes.
And you don't think that the Labor Party and the Greens combined with Senator Pocock, that they won't just pass whatever they want to? How do you know that they won't put up to actually have a separate nation within this nation for the Aboriginal people? How can you going to tell me that they won't put up to have extra seats in Parliament, which is what they want, purely for Aboriginal people? This has happened in New Zealand, Chris. You can't deny it. The people in New Zealand said it was a big mistake. The same as what happened in Canada with the Inuit people, the provinces there. It's been an absolute bloody failure there.
But you know they can't put up something like extra seats in Parliament without another referendum. That would require a referendum, a change to the Constitution.
No, you're wrong.
Of course it would.
No, it isn't. You're wrong. You do not need an extra constitution. You do not need that whatsoever. They can actually increase the number of seats because the Senate is half the number of seats to the lower house, so they can put up extra seats. You don't need a referendum to do that at all, Chris.
And set them aside for Indigenous people. I mean, it's just not going to happen. That is just a real scare. Now, I agree with you. Why would you trust Labor and the Greens to run a voice when it's legislated? They might go too far. It might not work very well. But that's also the safety valve, isn't it? Because you know that a coalition government could come in and they can reform it because the power is in the Parliament. And no one would expect that the voice would be smooth sailing. You would expect other governments to tinker with it and reform it. And that's what I would expect to happen for years to come, wouldn't you?
And that's what they said. They want to put in the Constitution so it can never be changed without another referendum by the people. And
well,
you know that will never happen because no Parliament will put it up for another referendum.
Yeah,
so therefore, it is important now. They can do legislation now. Why doesn't Albanese do legislation now, which he can do under the Constitution? He can do it. But this is divisive. This is putting one race against every other Australian. Where's my rights in this country, Chris? Yeah. Where's my rights? Why should it be? Why should it be just because you're an Aboriginal to have an advisory body? I
think you've got a good voice. But just the 2 points on there. One is it can be changed by Parliament. It can be changed. It can't be eliminated. It can't be abolished. The Constitution just requires that the voice exists. Changing it can happen all the time through Parliament. You know that. And of course, the reason it's being legislated through a referendum is because this is for constitutional recognition. This is the whole plan, is to deliver constitutional recognition, and the idea that's being put forward with a broad consensus of Indigenous Australians is that should happen through a voice, right? We know it could be legislated.
We know it can be legislated, Chris, and this is why they're saying they need to have it enshrined in the Constitution so that basically we, the people, are acknowledging them to be the voice for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So the fact is, it is divisive. It is not right. On principle, it is not right. We should get rid of all this based on what race you are in this nation. The Constitution should be colourblind. We're all Australians together. I was born here. No Aboriginal has more say or more right to this land than what I do. And I think it's wrong, and I think you're being bloody minded about this, that you're not really seeing right through to have a clear debate on this and the outcomes that this could impose on the Australian people for many generations to come. And it really concerns me greatly where we are headed with this, and I hope the Australian people do really research this and understand the impact it will have on us as a nation and a people.
Pauline, I couldn't be more honest and open with you in the debate about this, and the country is split on this, and I'll continue to ask you questions and have people on both sides of the debate on this program. So thanks for joining us. Only a long 6 weeks to go.